As a bird, you don't think much, just in general. There's fleeting thoughts, of course, mostly needs. If you're thirsty, seek water. If you're hungry, seek seeds. If you're cold, seek warmth. It's difficult on occasion, but for the most part, it's a straightforward existence. That being said, certain birds are a bit stranger than others. There are birds that have bad habits, and there is one particular mourning dove who frequently found herself in odd places by no choice of her own. Not that she seemed to mind. In fact, it appeared that she enjoyed the whimsy, just flying where her wings took her. But out of all the places she had inadvertently ended up in, there was one that stood out to her as the most amazing, the most exciting and thrilling place she had ever seen with her beady little eyes. It was an anime convention. The first thing that struck her when she ended up in those rafters was the colors. Everywhere she looked, there was bright, unnatural hair, perfect for nesting with. She tried to move in closer to see more when a big television caught her eye. A video game trailer was playing on the screen. It was there she saw the most beautiful human she had ever seen in her life. His blue hair, his muscles. Her heart was moved. She couldn't bring herself to look away. In a way, that moment changed her. She had never cared much for the affairs of humans, but now? Her feathers quivered in excitement as she watched the newfound recipient of her affection swing a sword. How cool, how suave. She could have watched him forever. The weekend went by faster than she could have imagined. When everyone left and the convention hall was abandoned, she felt a profound sense of emptiness, sitting in her makeshift nest of stolen wig hairs and bits of convention programs. The bustling of humans and noise, the shiny elation of it all, made her reluctant to leave. But being inside without any humans meant no food. She stayed as long as she could, but when she had eaten the last overpriced convention hot dog scrap, she took flight with a heavy heart. But those sparkling images would remain in her mind, keeping her spirits high for years to come. 5 years ago. It was cold and dark, and the little bird was hungry. In the distance, she noticed the tiniest flicker of light. Her mind immediately jumped to warmth, and she dived towards the flame. As she squeezed her body through the crack in the window, she was startled by the sound of the wooden frame slamming down behind her. It seemed she had dislodged the small rock holding the window open in a hurry to get inside. No matter. It was more important that she let the heat soothe her shivering body. Approaching the candle, she breathed a sigh of relief. Fluffing her wet feathers in front of the flickering light, she finally looked around. She was in what appeared to be some kind of laboratory. She peeked at the formulas and figures on the chalkboard, but she couldn't make any sense of it. She took some time to let the warmth permeate her hollow bones, then prepared to take flight again into the night. But it was then that she realized she wasn't strong enough to lift the window to get out, despite her best efforts. She felt momentarily concerned before thinking to herself, it was fine. Surely someone would come and open the door or window eventually. And so she sat, and she slept, and she poked around the lab. But 48 hours later, panic was starting to set in. She couldn't find any water. There were plenty of unidentifiable liquids in various test tubes and vials, but how was she supposed to know if they were poisonous or not? Her dry throat and weakening body gave her little other option. She'd have to drink one. She picked the one that seemed the least threatening, a bluish liquid that most resembled water. She paused, wondering if it was worth the risk, but she had limited time before she would die anyway. It was now or never. Closing her eyes, she dipped her beak in. It tasted terrible, but the sweet hydration led her to gulp after gulp, as far as her beak could reach. At first, she felt only relief, pure bliss at finally having something coat her dry throat. But then her chest began to feel warm, unnaturally warm. This is it, she thought. I'm gonna die. Her chest burned. She felt herself fall into her side as her consciousness faded and the world became black. When she woke up, she yawned and went to ruffle her feathers before realizing that something didn't feel right. She looked at her wing, then screamed. It wasn't a wing. It was a human arm. It was skin. What the fuck? What the fuck? She grabbed her hands, her elbows, her face. No feathers at all. It seemed like she was wearing clothes, but she had no recollection of putting them on. She ran her fingers over the pink fabric. It was soft. There was a little black ribbon on her neck. She rolled it between her fingers. This was too weird. When she tried to stand up, she was surprised to learn that she could use her limbs without issue. It was just like when she was a bird. Her body was just bigger and less feathered. She barely had time to consider what this meant when the door slammed open. The former bird was greeted by an elf in a lab coat wielding a knife.
Who's in there?
He yelled before noticing her.
What the hell? Who are you? How did you get in here? This is the 3rd floor.
Why do you have a knife? Just like with her limbs, her voice came out clearly without any effort. She gently touched her throat, confused, but didn't have time to think about it before the elf approached her, tilting her chin up towards him.
What?
He peered around the room until his eyes rested on the mostly empty vial.
Oh.
I'm sorry, it's just I got stuck in here and I was really thirsty. She stuttered, eyes trained on the knife.
So you are... what, some kind of bird, originally?
He finally put the knife down, picking up the test tube and shaking it slightly.
I have to admit, I'm surprised this worked as well as it did. This was an experimental potion I've been working on, but I got sidetracked. It's supposed to turn an animal into a human, or vice versa.
He peered at her jacket, lifting the sleeve.
These look like feathers, so I'm assuming a bird. I didn't want to look at a bunch of naked people while testing this thing, so it's supposed to put clothes on you too. I'm glad that part worked. This is actually pretty convenient. I was looking for a test subject.
He seemed to be speaking his thoughts aloud, and he had quite a lot of them. With the initial shock subsiding, annoyance crept in. A test subject? Seriously? And it's a mourning dove. I'm a mourning dove.
A mourning dove, huh? Columbidae. Interesting. I should write this down.
He patted his pockets.
Hold on. Wait right there. What should I call you? I guess... Dove? Wait right there, Dove. I need a pen.
He exited the room so swiftly that Dove couldn't even react, just stared at him leaving, mouth agape. He returned shortly thereafter with not only the pen, but what appeared to be a hastily made sandwich and a container of water. Dove felt her stomach growling when she saw it. It seemed that the alchemist heard its pained cries and chuckled, putting the sandwich and water in her hands.
Here, eat.
As much as Dove wanted to be indignant, she had to be grateful. She was starving. Looking back and forth from the sandwich to his eyes, she at last gently took the sandwich. She took one bite, then began to shovel as much of it in her mouth as she could. She chugged the water in what was only a matter of seconds.
Whoa, slow down. You okay?
The elf tilted his head with concern. Dove swallowed, then took a moment to catch her breath before asking, "Who are you? Where am I?"
Oh, I guess I forgot to introduce myself. Apologies. I'm Thaden Dragmire.
He absent-mindedly played with his short ponytail as he spoke.
I'm an alchemist. Although some call me a warlock. I dabble in science and magic in equal measure, so I suppose either one is technically accurate.
He pulled a seat over from one of the desks, gesturing to another one nearby for Dove to take.
You're in my home. I guess it's a castle, if you want to be specific.
I see. Dove looked around with her new point of view, the height of a human. It was a little disorienting.
Okay, Dove. How's this? Just let me take some notes about your transformation, and then I can turn you back into a bird. Does that work?
Thaden asked. Dovely looked down at her human hands and a realization dawned on her. She was a human now, with human hands. She could do things she had only dreamed about. She could watch anime freely. She could play video games and see her blue-haired husband. She didn't have to wait for someone with thumbs to do those things for her. Her eyes sparkled with exhilaration. She didn't even notice that Thaden was waiting for an answer.
Dove? Hello? Does that work?
His eyebrows scrunched together and he quickly scrawled a note.
The subject is spacey. Can't tell if it's due to the potion or if that's just her nature.
No! She blurted out. She grabbed his hands in hers. I want to stay a human! Thaden's eyes narrowed. His reaction caught her off guard and she dropped his hands. He opened his mouth slowly before speaking.
I'm not so sure about that, Dove. To be a human is an incredibly difficult and painful thing. Being a bird is much easier. Not to say that there's no happiness to be had in being human. There certainly is. But there's a price to pay for that happiness.
Dove met his eyes with irritated indignation, but was taken aback when she saw no condescending attitude there, only genuine concern. Dove paused for only a moment before answering. I appreciate your concern, but I've always dreamed of being able to watch anime and play video games and open chip bags by myself. I may not know what exactly being human entails, but it can't possibly be so bad that it outweighs that. And have you heard of Crom from Fire Emblem? If I'm a human, I can kiss him. Thaden briefly wondered if he should inform her that Crom was not a real person, but decided against it. She would find out. And the despair that she'd feel then, well, she would quickly learn a taste of the kind of disappointment that only humans could experience. He ran a hand through his bangs and sighed loudly.
Alright. You can stay a human if you want to. But there's more to being human than kissing Crom Fire Emblem. If I let you do this, stay in human form, I don't want this to reflect badly on me for setting you loose on the world. Stay with me for a week. I'll teach you the basics of being human. Then you can go out and experience what it is to be human for yourself.
Yes! Thank you, Théoden! Dove cheered and rubbed her head into his, messing up both of their hair.
That's... okay. No. Humans don't do that. I guess this is going to be our first lesson.
Théoden fixed his hair, silently asking himself what he'd gotten himself into.
Come along, Dove. I've got a spare room. You can stay there for now.
Does it have a gaming system?
No, it doesn't have a gaming system. I live in a castle. I don't have anything like that.
This time, Théoden did wear a condescending look that asked, "Are you stupid?" "I want to leave."
Well, too bad. You can't leave. Come on, let's go.
True to his word, Théoden spent the week teaching her basic human behavior so she wouldn't terrify or perturb the general public. Somewhere along the way, he had begun calling her Dovely. When Dovely pointed it out to him, he huffed that it was because he was getting it mixed up with the word lovely. He would sooner die than admit it was affectionate. Despite his obvious genius and mostly cool-headed demeanor, Dovely was quick to notice that he didn't have many friends coming in and out. He said that he liked it that way because it let him focus, but Dovely had a sneaking suspicion that he was secretly happy to have company. Though the How to Be Human lessons often ended with them screaming at each other and butting heads, Dovely thought it was the most fun she'd ever had. Not that she'd ever say to his face. But she knew she couldn't stay. After all, the man didn't have internet or video games. It was basically unlivable. At the end of the 7th day, Théoden led her to the front door, opening it wide.
Here.
He handed her a small backpack.
A stock of potions, just in case you change your mind about wanting to go back to being a bird. Or just to get out of a pinch even. And some food and things, just enough to get you back to civilization.
Théoden. She looked up at him, clutching the bag like it was a treasure. He could see the gratitude in her eyes. Embarrassed, he looked away.
You've made your choice, Dovely. Go. Find out what it means to be human. And when you feel like you've figured it out, come back and see me again. I'll be waiting.
Present day. Almost there. Dudley ducked beneath a branch, pushing the leaves away from her face. Ah, there it is! She gazed at the castle, still as overbearing as she last remembered it. They'd sent countless letters back and forth, but this was her first time seeing it in person since then. I wonder if he looks any different, she mumbled to herself. She absent-mindedly adjusted her bracelets and smoothed her skirt. When she found the stone path hidden beneath the vines and moss, it was fairly easy to get to the entrance. She leaned her head back to take in the door. Somehow, it still looked exactly as she remembered it, several sizes bigger than it had any need to be. She reached her hand up to the cold iron knocker and briefly considered doing 3 polite knocks before grabbing the knocker and slamming it into the door repeatedly as hard as she could. Théoden! It's Dovely! It took about 8 knocks before the door was thrown open. A familiar tired face peered back at her, his usual calm demeanor only thinly veiling a lopsided smile. Another thing that hasn't changed, she thought gleefully. Dovely threw open her arms and beamed at him. I'm back!